everyone, and welcome. Get comfy, maybe grab a blanket, because you've just tuned into Scary Bedtime Stories. That's right, a series of bite-sized tales designed to keep you up just a little bit later than you planned. Each story is told from my perspective, so you're right there with me, feeling every shiver, every creeping shadow, every unexplained noise. We're diving into the kinds of stories that make you double-check the locks and listen a little too closely to the creaks in your house. So, if you're ready for some chills, some thrills, and maybe a little bit of, what was that? Turn off the lights and let's get started. Sweet dreams. Or not. This is 9 Lives of Fear. The Shadow in the Swamp. Deep in the bayou, where Spanish moss hung like skeletal fingers and cypress trees stood like ancient sentinels, there was a place even the locals refused to name. They whispered about a shadow that drifted through the murky waters, a presence untouched by daylight, one that seemed to drain the very life from the air. As the sun sank behind the tree line, casting a sickly yellow haze across the swamp, a lone traveler named Mallory realized she had wandered too far into its labyrinth. Her once steady boat was now listing to one side, its wooden hull groaning as the current nudged it against the cypress knees. Mallory had always been drawn to the darker corners of the world, chasing the stories others were too afraid to tell. But as night settled in, she felt a truth she had never admitted. Some mysteries were meant to stay buried. The air thickened with the scent of decay, cold and heavy, enough to cling to her skin. Then she saw it. A shape, darker than the surrounding shadows, was gliding between the trees. It didn't move like anything alive. It warped the air, bending the space around it, as if reality itself recoiled from its presence. Mallory tried to scream, but dread sealed her throat. The shadow drifted closer, its weight pressing against her chest and suffocating her. The darkness gathered into something like eyes, hollow, ancient, and calculating, studying her as though deciding whether she belonged to this world or the next. And then, without warning, it vanished. The swamp fell silent. Only the soft lapping of water against the boat remained. Mallory's heartbeat thundered in her ears as she forced herself to breathe again. She turned to look behind her and froze. Her shadow stretched across the deck, longer than it should have been and darker than the surrounding night. It moved with a slow, deliberate pull, as though guiding her deeper into the swamp's waiting throat. At that moment, Mallory understood the truth. She wasn't alone anymore, and whatever had watched her from the darkness had claimed her as its own. Follow the flickering streetlights when driving home after midnight. The rain-drenched streets shimmered like polished onyx, mirroring the skeletal silhouettes of trees that lined the deserted road. The darkness carried an ominous weight, a palpable unease that settled in the pit of her stomach. The flickering streetlights, usually a reassuring presence, now cast eerie shadows across the asphalt, like skeletal fingers reaching out to snatch her. As Brooke navigated her car down the isolated highway, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The GPS had led her on a circuitous route, supposedly to avoid traffic, but now she wondered if it was more than a coincidence. The road seemed to twist and turn, leading her deeper into the heart of nowhere. It started with a single flickering light, a beacon that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. At first, she dismissed it as a faulty bulb, but as she drew closer, she realized it seemed to beckon her. Morbid curiosity took hold, and she inched forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The streets grew progressively darker, the lights spaced farther apart. It was as if she had entered a different realm, one where reality's rules no longer applied. The flickering light intensified, illuminating a stretch of road that seemed to go on forever. And then she saw them. Other cars parked along the roadside, their occupants mysteriously absent. A sense of unease crept over her as she realized she wasn't alone. The flickering light seemed to draw her towards some unknown destination. As she drove, the road narrowed, the trees closing in on her like sentinels. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and decay. The flickering light pulsed brighter, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. Suddenly, it went out. The darkness was absolute, a living entity that wrapped itself around her like a shroud. Brooke's heart raced, her senses on high alert as she strained her eyes, trying to pierce the void. But there was nothing. No light, no stars, just endless black. Then came a whisper, a soft, raspy voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Turn around," it breathed. "Go back." Brooke's hands trembled as she gripped the wheel. Part of her wanted to flee, to turn the car around and race back toward the city's safety. But another part, driven by morbid curiosity, urged her on. As she crept forward, the darkness coalesced into a presence, a tall, imposing figure looming in the distance. The air vibrated with an otherworldly energy, as though reality itself was about to tear apart. And then the figure vanished. The streetlights flickered back to life, casting a harsh, unforgiving glare across the landscape. Brooke stared at the empty road, her heart pounding. She knew she had to escape, to leave the darkness behind. But as she turned the car around, she caught a glimpse of something in the rearview mirror, a figure standing on the side of the road, watching her leave. The image lingered, a haunting presence that stayed with her long after she had driven away. As she looked back, she realized the figure wasn't the only thing watching her. A flickering streetlight seemed to watch too, their pulsing glow a reminder that some secrets were better left unexplored. As we wrap up tonight's scary bedtime story, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've shared together. These stories may be unsettling, but they also serve as reminders of the power of imagination, the unknown, and how we face our fears. I hope that, as you lie in bed tonight, you remember that sometimes the scariest things aren't what we see in the shadows, but what we feel inside. Thank you for joining me in this journey into the dark. I hope these tales will linger in your thoughts and keep you questioning what's real and what's not. Until next time, remember, the scariest stories are the ones we don't tell and the ones we live. Sleep tight if you can.
You've survived another night of scary bedtime stories from 9 Lives of Fear. But don't get comfortable. If the shadows whispered to you tonight, hit like before they whisper again. Share this video with someone who thinks they're brave. Let's see how long their courage lasts. And subscribe, because around here, every click feeds the darkness, and the darkness remembers. Where the shadows linger long after the story's end. Stay scared.